Again, everybody, thank you for joining us today. This is the program on education policy and governance, and I am delighted to turn it over to our director, Professor Paul Peterson. Paul?
Welcome to the 9th session on school choice in the post-pandemic era. This is a virtual webinar series that will continue again next week for our final session. It is sponsored by the Program on Education Policy and Governance at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. I am Paul Peterson, the director. This particular session is being devoted to school choice within districts. A very high percentage of American families choose their schools simply by purchasing a home within a particular area. In larger school districts, there are, in addition to that form of choice, magnet schools and technical education schools and exam schools and many other types of schools that families choose. In some districts, choice is available to every student in the district. So there is a lot of district school choice. How does it work? How beneficial is it? Is this the wave of the future when it comes to school choice? To weigh on these topics, we have 3 panelists joining us today. And I will turn the session over to Daniel Hamlin, the professor of education at the University of Oklahoma, who can introduce them. Let me first, though, recognize Antonio Wentland, Nick Tavares, and Michael Poor, who have carried the administrative and technical burden for the seminar series. So Daniel, please introduce our guests.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning to everyone. So I'm going to quickly turn to our panelists here and we'll jump right into the session. So our first panelist is Robin Lake. She is director of the Center on Reinventing Public Education, which is a nonpartisan research and policy analysis organization that's housed at the University of Washington. Her research focuses on U.S. public school system reforms, including school choice, charter schools, and also portfolio management. And she's co-author of the book Charter Schools and Accountability in Public Education. Our next panelist is Alberto Carvalho. Since 2008, he's been superintendent of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, which is the nation's 4th largest school system. During his tenure, he's expanded school choice by over 1,000 offerings that include bilingual programs, fine and performing arts, biotechnology, engineering, robotics, aviation, forensic sciences, and many others. And during his time, Miami-Dade has also become one of the nation's highest performing urban school systems. And then finally, we have Michael Hinojosa. He is superintendent of Dallas Independent School District, which serves about 145,000 students. It sits at the heart of a rapidly growing metro area in Dallas, where there's about 6.5 million people. And the Council of Great City Schools recently awarded him the Green Garner Award as the 2020 Urban Educator of the Year. So those are our panelists. Before we jump right in, just a quick note to the audience. We want to hear from you, so please do post your questions to us. If you can keep them brief, that'd be great, because it will allow us to field those questions and pose them to the panelists. So to start off, we're gonna start with Robin Lake and give each panelist an opportunity to speak on the session question, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. So Robin, can I turn things over to you?
You sure can. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today to talk about this important topic. I'm just going to try to give you a quick lay of the land around district choice. How many students are involved in district choice? What are the motivations for districts to take this on? What do we know about the outcomes and how to get good outcomes when districts do endeavor in this area? And then finally, I think it's worth us talking a little bit about why are we talking about this now? We're in the middle of a pandemic and coming toward the end of it, we hope. Why is it relevant? And I have some thoughts on that, but I'll try to keep my remarks brief so we can get right to the superintendents who are doing the real and very important work. So in terms of how big is this thing? One of the great ironies in talking about district school choice is that in my mind, it's one of the least discussed areas of school choice, but actually one of the most important. And I'm just going to ask you in your mind to think about, if I asked you how many students are enrolled in non-charter school public schools of choice, what would you think? So magnet schools, alternative schools, open enrollment schools. So basically allowing families to choose a school other than their assigned district school. So in your mind, you might have a single digit number. It's actually almost 20% of all students in the US. 20%, that's a lot, 1 in 5. And then Paul was mentioning residential school choice. So that's the more sort of gray market, if you think of it that way, district school choice, when parents will admit that, yes, they actually bought a home in a good school district so they could find a suitable public school for their child. That's another 20%. That's 20%. So that's a lot of kids, and we just don't talk about this enough. That's compared to just 10% of kids enrolled in private schools, and overall, charter schools, about 4% of all students nationwide, about 6% of all students in public schools. So that's just to give you a little bit of context. And then, so when we were talking about district school choice and these numbers, what is the it that we're really talking about? Well, as we'll hear from the superintendents, I'm sure there are a lot of different approaches in the country. Districts are taking this on in very, very different ways. And the situation has evolved very much over the last few decades. And so I'll give you a little bit of a spectrum. So on the far end of the spectrum are in some ways district schools of choice that aim to serve a very specialized need or student population. And I think in some ways this was sort of the birth of school choice in districts. There's some kids who are highly at risk that need a very special approach. Some districts offer choices for students with disabilities who need to find a good fit. And then out of that kind of desire to meet individual student needs and to start treating students as a diverse set of needs in the community that need to be served, magnet schools sort of arose, and magnet schools can serve that purpose. They also, in the 70s in particular, were meant to sort of desegregate students across the district. And so those are the early sort of emergence of choice. Of course, now districts have stepped up to compete or co-opt with charter schools as that's become more of a factor in the country. They've tried to create space for innovation and educator entrepreneurship to allow educators to create kind of the schools of their dreams. And of course, and as we move down the spectrum, there are more and more superintendents who think of a portfolio of options in the community being necessary to address the reality that kids learn in different ways. Parents want different fits, and there is no one best way. And so I would say at the very, very farthest end of the spectrum are districts who say, we want to really reinvent governance in our community and encourage every school to take on a distinctiveness and an approach and allow families to choose within that. And then to what end? So the kind of the spectrum of options and opportunities and strategies out there, to what end? There's hugely, as you might imagine, hugely varied outcomes around district school choice, and that's changed over time. It depends on the approach. It depends on so many different factors. But I will just make the argument that I think that in general, the more idiosyncratic or kind of choice by default districts take on, maybe sort of creating a small number of options that may have uneven quality, and encouraging families to sort of fight for those seats, maybe not investing in transportation, not investing in equity in terms of resources and opportunities and supports for those schools. You just don't get great outcomes, as that might be obvious. On the other hand, the more comprehensive kind of choice by design that districts take on to continuously assess student needs and demand for new schools, to intentionally develop new schools to meet those needs with incubators and investments in quality school leaders, making sure that those schools are funded equally, equitably, and real and sustained attention to autonomy and accountability for results, information, transportation, and enrollment systems. And then, this is not, my final point around investments in quality and comprehensiveness of choice programs is districts that are really successful in these areas do not approach this as just a technocratic exercise. When they really commit to choice throughout the district, they also recognize that this is a political endeavor, and it's an endeavor that will fail if there is not deep, authentic, community-driven demand and support for these kinds of programs. So it requires very savvy, compelling leadership to shepherd these initiatives forward. And then my just final point before I wrap is just the, on the point of why are we talking about this now? I just want to make the point that I think it really matters right now. Somebody who's been observing district response to the pandemic over the course of the last 2 years, I really believe that the districts who have been most successful in their pandemic response are those that have embraced choice and innovation and responsiveness to individual and family needs in a very aggressive way, and had already invested in that pre-pandemic. That does not mean giving up all control. And these two superintendents who are joining us today, I'm sure will talk to you about the balance between tight and loose when it comes to choice, and being able to pull things together as a system is really important, but being able to have an arm for innovation and responsiveness equally important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Superintendent Carvalho.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to connect not only with you, but with the viewing community. And I want to thank also Robin for so eloquently positioning this issue from a macro perspective across the country. I've been superintendent for 14 years in Miami-Dade, always serving the same district. And when we began this work back in 2008, 2009, only about 30% of our students were availing themselves of publicly offered choice in our community. Obviously, for a mega district like ours with about 350,000 students, that was a very small percentage of students whose parents were making these deliberate choices. At that time also, the number of programs that we offered, whether they were magnet programs, the availability of high quality charter options across zip codes, career academies, or district managed charter schools, were also much more narrow than they are now. We, since that time, made a conscious decision that as part of our theory of action, which includes our theory of action for student achievement, which includes these fundamental principles of aligning instruction to state standards, obviously, data-driven decision-making, developing great teachers, great leaders, aligning resources with student needs, expanding advanced academic programming, but we decided to place a very strong strategic focus on demand-driven reform and innovation. And over the past years, we have dramatically expanded the portfolio of options available to students and families district-wide. We have refined the process during those years to really recognize where there was a dearth of high-quality programs, where there were deficits as far as access to certain programs, mapping it out, exposing the community to it, marketing and creating greater awareness with our educational community, with the parent community, with the business community. actually going as far as aligning the future workforce needs of Miami-Dade based on chamber input and the economic development entity for our community with program development side by side with availability of grants from both public as well as private sector entities. As a result of that, and as a result of really creating a year-round process to advertise these programs via social media, via web presence, using also TV, radio, ad buys, all this information being exposed to the community has led to a very user-friendly means by which parents can search using our search engines for the best fit based on interest, rigor, level of educational programming, and desire for a student to really concentrate their study on a specific area. Gone are the days where students would have to travel by bus for 2-3 hours per day to get to that one school choice that really resonated with them. So our recruitment efforts are very aligned. We train principals, we train academy leaders on the recruitment process. We help them develop all the recruitment brochures and pamphlets and other resources. And as I said, we're at a point now where the application process does not begin and end in a timed fashion. It really extends throughout the year. So where are we today? Today, we have close to 1,100 choice programs across all grade levels, mainly framed around specific areas, specific themes of study, such as international programs, liberal arts, virtual options, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and art, visual and performing arts. Out of the 1,100 choice programs for all grades, 115 of them are magnet-based in Miami-Dade. And now we have a remarkable 74% of all students in Miami-Dade, the now third largest school system in America. We surpassed Chicago in terms of enrollment, making a conscious decision along with their parents to attend any one school in Miami-Dade, any one program in Miami-Dade. That is complemented by a number of additional options in our community. 130 charter schools, including district managed charter schools, which are a hybrid governance model, to Robin's point, that we developed in Miami-Dade, where basically the school system becomes the management entity for these charter entities. The benefit to the consumer is that we have been able to build schools at no cost to the district, through the conveyance of land. We hire the engineers and the architects, but private sector entities actually fund all of these initiatives. Independent board that makes a decision regarding staffing, et cetera, but the back of the house support in terms of budget and finance, in terms of clearing teachers, in terms of professional development, food distribution, transportation, are all managed by the school system. We knew we were onto something when we rolled out district managed charter schools, because opposing sides across the country, meaning teachers unions and for-profit charter management entities, both threatened to sue us. Neither one of them was happy with this different model. It has worked very well for us. Now, why is this important for us? Whether we're talking about magnet schools, non-magnet choice programs, career academies, district managed charter schools, now scholarships and vouchers provided through the state of Florida, or some of the new virtual school offerings that we continue to offer for a small percentage of our student population. We have obviously studied the performance in choice versus non-choice programs, and we believe that our first-in-class NAEP performance for 4th and 8th graders on the NAEP in reading and mathematics is absolutely attributable to the power of choice that brings rigor and relevance. We believe that the explosive nature of international baccalaureate, Cambridge programs, advanced academics, dual enrollment, and College Board advanced placement have exploded as a result of allowing schools to make decisions influenced by the demand that parents bring to our schools. We believe that the elimination of F and D schools in Miami-Dade which back in 2008 numbered in the dozens. Now there are 0F, 0D schools in Miami-Dade, is a function at least in part, in that strategic decision to decentralize this one-size-fits-all and create a one-size-fits-none universal, ubiquitous choice for all students in Miami-Dade in the way that's managed to ensure the continuity of equity and fair access to all students. Lastly, we're an A-rated school system. That too is a function of this explosive choice. We go to an extreme in really making annual decisions about which programs are working, which ones are not, which ones have greater demand, where are there still areas in our community where parents are struggling to get their kids in, where the waiting lists are long. And it is not uncommon, much like this year, for us to roll out 60 new choice programs on average per year. So that's where Miami-Dade is. Our goal, part of our strategic plan, is to reach 90% choice within 2 years for our students. And at that point, you will really have 100% choice, because even the students who attend neighborhood schools will be able to pick choice within that school, which is already part of our choice framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Hinojosa.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me on the panel with my great friend, Alberto Carvalho. He is really a rock star superintendent. And I always love hearing him talk and the progress. And Miami was in the hole when Alberto took it over in 2008. And it has been amazing to watch. My story is a little different, but there are a lot of similarities. I was superintendent in Dallas from 2005 to 2011. Then I went to Cobb County, Georgia. I was retired for a year. And then in 2015, the board brought me back. Why do I tell you that story? Well, when I was superintendent in Dallas in the first term, I call that Hinojosa 1.0. During 1.0, we only had 10% of our students that went to charter schools. In Texas, the state authorized charter schools, not us. So I leave, come back 4 years later. Now there's 40,000 students in our district that go to charter schools. And our enrollment stayed flat or declined a little bit. So all of a sudden, and I'm not a fan of charter schools. I'm a fan of great schools. It just depends. It's just that some of the charter schools around here aren't very good. They're mom and pop shops. The ones that have a management organization are a little bit better. But you got to know which problem you're trying to solve. So we had a lot of problems when I came back that I had to solve. And this was one of them. Now, we are a school system, not a system of schools. So we had to figure out how we do this. Well, we also, when I was in Georgia, I went to the Georgia Business School, and they taught us the difference between strategic planning and strategic thinking. A strategic plan is 5 years from now. None of us know what we're going to be doing 5 years from now. Strategic thinking is an 18-month increment. And every quarter you pierce the next quarter. I've been accused of being innovative. No, I'm not innovative. I just am strategic, because I plan on what I know what I'm going to be doing personally 18 months from now and professionally. And every quarter you pierce the next quarter. So once we saw we had this huge problem of losing students, and let me give you a little bit more history about Dallas. In the 1990s, Dallas had 5 superintendents in 5 years, and 1 went to federal prison. And then I'm an immigrant. I grew up in Dallas. I was a student in Dallas. I was a teacher in Dallas. I couldn't even get an interview for an assistant principal's job. So finally, my predecessor, the first time, came in and stabilized the district from 2002 to 2005. And then I got hired. I finally got an interview in Dallas, and I've been superintendent twice. This is my 27th year as superintendent, and this is my 13th year in Dallas. Alberto, it takes time to execute on these things. And a lot of times superintendents don't last but 3 years, and they're one and done. And very few get to come back for a second time. So what we started doing, because we think strategically, we came up with strategic initiatives. One of those strategic initiatives was public school choice. We said, we got to turn this thing around. And it was a strategic initiative because it was going to be important, and we had to put money into it. It was a fiscal note. Every year we decided that we wanted to make our school special. Now, our number one goal is have our kids go to their neighborhood school. But if you don't pick our neighborhood school, we don't want you to pick a charter school, homeschool, no school. So we want you to have options. And so now, in the last 7 years, I'm about to describe what we've been able to do. In Dallas, we believe in the IRS, the good IRS, not the bad IRS. Incubate, replicate, and scale. We take an idea, we incubate it. If it works, we replicate it and make sure it works in another context. And then we go all the way, because incrementalism is innovation's worst enemy. Yeah, I read Tom Peters in 1994. Yes, I read the Harvard Business Journal, Tom Carter, Why Transformations Fail. There's not a sense of urgency, and there's not enough of a guiding coalition to solve the problem. So yes, I read Peter Singh about creative tension and stretching things and making things happen. Yes, I read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. All of those things formed in my head to create the systems that we've put together to help make this work in Dallas. So when we launched, we went to the Stanford School of Design Thinking. They trained our people on how to do it. The other problem, we never apologize for our demographics. Dallas, we're 90% economically disadvantaged. Dallas, we're not Dallas County, we're Dallas City. We're the 5th largest city, we're the 15th largest district in the country, but the 5th largest city district. With all due respect to my great friend Alberto, he has Key Biscayne. I don't have Highland Park, I don't have Garland, I don't have Coppell, I don't have any of the county. I just got, you go looking for minorities, and that's all you look for, justice, and that's all you find. It's just us. We have 5% white kids. We have 72% Latino. We have 21% African American. We have 47% English learners. We have more English learners than El Paso has students, than San Antonio ISD has students. So we can't be successful with these kids. We can't be successful. And Dallas is a tale of two cities. When you come to Dallas, you see all these big, beautiful buildings. The construction crane is the state bird of Texas. But it's a tale of two cities. The poor kids are the ones living here, just like me, where I grew up. So what do? We went to the Stanford School of Design. They helped us come up with this model. And then we're also trying to solve this integration problem and segregation. We're still a segregated city. So what part of our public school choice is, we have the Office of Transformation and Innovation. Transformation is a startup school. Innovations is a neighborhood school that gets to reinvent themselves, and we'll give them money and we'll give them training and we'll have them come up with the ideas. But also at our transformation schools, which are startup schools, 50% of the kids have to be economically disadvantaged and 50% not. So here we are socially engineering the behavior and the results that we want. We can't use race, so we use economics as a proxy. And so we've had our teachers come up. One of our teachers developed a City Lab High School, which is an architecture school. We had a guy who went to Johns Hopkins and wanted to become a teacher. He developed Ignite Middle School, a personalized learning school that he got to apply for. We gave him money, we gave him a 0 year, and then he got to pick his team to go in and make that school happen. Right now, we have a school with SMU and Toyota in West Dallas, one of the most impoverished schools, communities in Dallas, and they have a STEM school there. Toyota's brought so many resources, and so has SMU, Southern Methodist University. It's incredible. Next year, we're going to open a biomedical school on the campus of UT Southwestern. Our principal was a principal at an elementary school. He's going to be the principal. He was a surgeon in Colombia, and he is going to be the principal of that school. We've gone with Downtown Dallas Inc. Now you can go from pre-K to a doctoral degree and never leave downtown Dallas, because we have a K-8 Montessori school that goes up to grade levels, and then we have City Lab, and also we have another early college high school that has gone there. Speaking of high schools, it was, when I came back, oh my goodness, it was amazing how awful we were. I don't brag too much about magnet schools, because magnet schools are going to be great because we have entrance requirements. And if all the smart kids are going to a school, yeah, they're going to be good. So I like to brag on these other schools. So we created this thing called, we had an early college model. Those 3 schools were wildly successful, but they were small and you didn't have the high school experience. So that was the incubation. Then I had a principal ask me, can I do that model inside of a comprehensive high school? I said, you better do something, fool, because the state's about to close your school. And so he did, and it worked. That was the replication. Then we took that to scale. And let me tell you the results. In 2009, when I was superintendent of Dallas, I'm embarrassed to tell you that only 7% of our kids got any kind of post-secondary credential 6 years after graduating from high school. This year, 2021, in a pandemic, 10% of our kids graduated from high school with an associate's degree before the clock starts. And by the way, Alberto's right. If you don't have transportation, you don't have choice. I spend $5 million a year on transportation because we got to get the kids there because they're poor. They're not going to get there. So we have to find a way to transport them. I had to take down a corrupt bus agency so we could take it over so that we could get our kids to school. I spent more money on them than we did when taking it over ourselves. So we've had to take that on while we're doing this. Let me finish here with a couple of other thoughts. Apple is helping us design a hybrid school that's already open. They're also helping us reinvent our libraries. And so Apple started stalking us. And I said, why are you stalking us? Because they said, we've never seen a school district that can take, because in Dallas, we don't close schools. We repurpose them. Never seen a school district that in 90 days could shut down 3 campuses and reinvent them and start them fresh as an innovative or a transformative school. We've had to use marketing. We've had to completely change how we think. We have these outstanding school models. And yet we also want people to have the traditional experience. Let me just finish by saying that I've been a superintendent for 27 years. I've been a suburban superintendent 3 times. Suburban parents and I'm shocked by the data that Robin said. Suburban parents usually buy this house. They want their kid to go to this elementary school, this middle school, and this high school. Urban parents think a lot different. This is where I go now. Where's my next best option? And so I'm very proud of my team because I've pushed them. I'm very proud of my board. And because of our courage and because of our strategy, the community passed a 13-cent tax increase to support this along with our other strategic initiatives. And we passed a $3.4 billion bond program so that we could continue to build these buildings all over town. That's my story and I'm sticking to it, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. Thank you all. I have a question about where we are today in this period when we're transitioning from the COVID world and hopefully to the post-COVID world. But a lot of families are hesitant to send their child back to school. A lot of kids don't want to go back to school. There's a lot of talk about fighting in school and bullying in school. What's the situation? I mean, choice, does that include increasingly the choice of learning at home online? How many of your students are facing that? And is this a good thing or not? Is this a big risk that we are taking? And I'd like to hear from all of you. Who wants to go first?
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, go ahead, Alberto, and I'll weigh in after you.
I'll give it a shot. So, Paul, I think what we are observing in Miami, I think is what's being detected across the country. You're absolutely right. There have been some significant, very serious deleterious impacts as a result of the social isolation that kids were under for the better part of 18 months. And I think it will take a long time for us to really have a true assessment of long-term implications associated with that. In addition to that, it is obvious that there's been a dramatic, historic in nature impact in terms of proficiency across all areas. Some will describe it as unfinished learning, learning loss, whatever you feel most comfortable with. There was an impact in terms of what kids learned during that period of time. That cannot be denied. And yes, there is also a recognition of significant behavior changes as far as students are concerned. We're seeing two types of behaviors that are reaching unparalleled levels. Either students are demonstrating a greater level of apathy to their schooling experience, meaning their energy level is down, or they are manifesting more aggression than they did before. We've seen an escalation in those cases. So, the crisis is real, and those kids were in crisis prior to COVID, fell into a deeper level of crisis. In Miami-Dade, obviously, and I'm sure this is true across the country, we began the mitigation of these conditions as soon as we began to detect them, actually anticipating that they will manifest themselves. Obviously, additional time on task, continue to explode choice options for students, but now embedding as part of those choice options critical attention to the most fragile communities of students, whether they are students with disabilities, English language learners, students in poverty. And what that means is before, after school academic support. Another level of choice is, driven quite frankly by good AI solutions that meet students where they are, beyond the school bell, available district-wide for students, in addition to, non-traditional academies, summer academy, expanded summer academy, for the first time ever, the equivalent of year-round schooling, with more breaks, but more days of schooling altogether, in addition to Saturday academies and even winter break academies for these students. As far as our schools, we have about 420 schools district-wide. We opened this school year with the expectation that every single student would join our schools in person. And we've had great success with that, with exception of about 3,000 students who are enrolled in two virtual options that include both synchronous as well as asynchronous teaching. One is the Miami-Dade Virtual Academy, and the other one, Miami-Dade Online. And the Miami-Dade Online is really a very advanced, academically advanced program that requires a great deal of independent activity on the part of the students. But with the exception of those 3,000 students, the rest of our student population is physically in school. And I have to say that the conditions so far are very, very, very positive, very low positivity rate, very, very low number of cases per 100,000. So we don't see a return back to the conditions that we were facing just even 6 months ago. With that said, I'm not even happy with the 3,000 students that are in these virtual offerings because, number one, we see a disproportionate representation of students with disabilities in those programs. They are not receiving what we believe is a modicum of appropriateness as far as meeting the requirements of their IEPs. We continue to see the regression primarily measured through progress monitoring tools like interim assessments and iReady. A lot of students who represent ethnic minorities, and I think this is as a result of some degree of misinformation. So we are aggressively establishing parent conferences with the parents of these students to bring back as many as we can to a physical face-to-face environment on the basis of what the current data is indicating for us.
Superintendent Hinojosa, what do you find in Dallas? You got a lot of students learning virtually?
And actually, we've decided to get them all back. The biggest mistake I made during this whole time is that I allowed the high school principals and my chief of school leadership to tell me that we could have a hybrid model. And the hybrid model ended up being only in person 1 or 2 days a week. And that was because they said because social distancing and how many people are in high schools, that was their rationale. Well, our kids did not do well when they were out. And in fact, only 5% of our kids did well in virtual learning. For those 5%, by the way, those are the ones that are middle class because they had so much support at home. So what we did, we started bringing them back. The state said, you're not going to get any money if you don't bring them back in person. So we started bringing them back. The best decision I made was start last school year late by 3 weeks. Then we started getting them back by October. Then I had to fight the governor on the masks. And then we said, you got to be in person. And then we got startled because when we got to April, only 60% of our high school seniors were on track to graduate. So we had to do Operation Comeback. We went and we knocked on doors and we did everything. We incentivized the behavior that we wanted to get them finally back in. Luckily, we were able to get them across the finish line because we had more time, because we started late, we went late. So that was our experience. Now, for those 5%, we do need to do something for them. And so that's why Apple helped us start that hybrid school, and that's for younger kids. But now we're also looking at next year opening a full hybrid school for those kind of 5%. But let me tell you about a different situation, what we have found, which Alberto alluded to. And there's if people are misbehaving and fighting each other on airplanes, can you imagine kids that have been cooped up for 18 months? And teachers are the first reporters to Child Protective Services of abuse. And they've looked around their table and somebody's gone. They died in their family. So what we decided to do, I said, why would I ever suspend a student again? We quit suspending pre-K 2 kids, but now I said, why would I ever suspend a student? Because we got the devices, we got broadband, we got curriculum, synchronous, asynchronous. Why would I ever? So I was expecting them to come back with a separate room where if they got in trouble, they would be sent. 80% of our suspensions were discretionary. And we only have 10% African-American males, and 51% of our suspensions were African-American males. So they came back to me with this concept called reset. Our football coaches can no longer run in-school suspension and scare the kids to death. Now we have a behavior specialist who we've hired at these campuses, and their job is to turn the behavior around. Now we still are having some fights, and so for that, you got to go and cool off. But instead of just punishing kids, now we're trying to change their behavior. And we did this at every secondary campus this year. Stay tuned. I hope it works. I don't know if it's going to work, but these kids have a lot of needs, both academically and emotionally, as they come back.
So thank you, Robin. Can you comment on the big picture across the country?
I mean, we're spending a lot of time looking at what is the impact at this point, the academic impact, of course, but somebody raised in the chat the social, emotional, and mental health needs of kids, and they are in general serious. But the bigger story, I think, is the diversity of experience and therefore impact. That there was no one pandemic experience for kids. Everybody had his or her own story, in part because of family background, but in part because of just how they relate to school. And as you alluded to, Paul, some kids actually had discoveries while they were outside of the traditional system that they want to retain going back. Some thrived in virtual learning, a small number, but some did. And we're talking with a lot of students with disabilities who, Alberto, I share your concern, absolutely. But I think it's also important that, some are saying, I was better able to focus when I was outside of a loud, chaotic classroom or for whatever reason. And so, and then there were kids who experienced freedom from bullying or racial bias in their schools. And so I think it's important that we understand that with that diversity of impact, we have to have a diverse set of solutions on the table. And now seems like a really great time to think about ways to use choice, not just in terms of school offerings, but also individual offerings. So individual pathways for kids who might need some special path. So, that's exciting to me. And so I think, that's a good reason to say, like, district choice can offer something really important. Maybe we should think about district choice, not just in terms of a portfolio of schools, but a portfolio of pathways and how we make sure that individual kids have access to that. I think, when it comes to the medical or health and safety kinds of issues right now, look, it's politically insanely hot. And I am seeing some districts saying, hey, rather than one district-wide solution or mandate, maybe we can have options for kids to meet their needs as a temporary stop to kind of take down the political vitriol. And so we're seeing districts saying, there could be a school option, a virtual school option for kids who aren't ready to be vaccinated quite yet. But long-term, we're going to have to deal with that. So, I think choice is a handy tool for recognizing that for academic, social, emotional, and political reasons, we have to look at individual student and family needs and respond to them.
Well, thank you. One thing I'm curious about are the specialized school offerings. They sound really exciting that you could go to an aviation school, you could do biotech. I mean, the options are just incredible. But I also wonder about how you make them substantive. So it seems like you really need some particular instructional expertise to really provide some of these offerings. So I'm wondering what you do to make it substantive, so it's not just kind of a theme that you have, that if you go to an aviation school, you're actually learning about that.
Yeah, I'll start with that. And that was one of my fears early on. And so we give people a year to open a new school. And first of all, and then we send them through, they know the design process, and then it depends on the specialty. And we then train them. And then we've learned to make sure that the teachers get trained. So we take that prep year, that 0 year, to set up all the conditions for success. And it's different. We have also started these career institutes where we have pathways like aviation, and we teach kids how to be pilots. And we hired, American Airlines came in and told us in community college, your stuff's antiquated. We said, okay, we'll take out our stuff, give us your stuff. And they said, okay, we will. And now they hired 10 kids this year out of one of our high schools that they trained for the last 4 years in P-TECH, and they're making $58,000 a year. So part of that is you have to have this partnership with business. You don't need to be afraid of business. You need to be able to use their core competence. And in Texas, as we're a district of innovation, we can have non-traditional teachers. Like at these career institutes and at these P-TECH, we have people that were professionals that don't have to go back and get a teaching credential. We can hire them as a teacher at our full salary. So you have to do a combination of all those plus the professional development. Alberto, you've been doing this a lot longer. How have you maintained that tremendous rigor that y'all are getting those great results in Miami?
Yeah, I much like you, when we talk about choice in Miami, it's not just IB, AP, thematic instruction, charter, non-charter, scholarship, voucher, et cetera. It's really a recognition that we need to take into account the economic needs, short and long-term economic needs of our community, and really engage the business community and the best individuals who project out the critical needs. In an effort to better align and create career pathways aligned to career clusters in our schools. And much like you, Michael, we graduate a huge number of students who have either a 2-year, the equivalent of an associate's degree from college, or an industry recognized certification, which then can be followed by an additional year beyond the 12th grade in a technical college, since we manage 7 different technical colleges. But there's a great deal of excitement over those programs that really connect with real world problems and real world emerging technologies and industries. Miami is becoming the Silicon Beach of the US, with a great deal of movement from California to Miami. And with it, we're seeing a great deal of excitement, but also investment, and a great deal of willingness on the part of private sector entities to modernize programs, to become advisors on the curriculum that's offered, purchase of equipment. Equally important are the specific alignments via partnerships that we have with targeted industries, whether we're talking about aviation. We have an aviation school and aviation technology, and airplane mechanics and repair school right across the street from the airport. In fact, we just accepted 2 donations of jets, airliners, for the benefit of these students. But banking and finance, creative design, hospitality, tourism, information technology, now cryptocurrency, believe it or not, and cybersecurity, life sciences, healthcare, trade and logistics, taking advantage of the location of the port. And then equally exciting for us is the fact that we have leveraged partnerships with private sector entities. And I'll give you one example. So the co-development of a choice school that is housed in probably the biggest auto dealer in Miami-Dade that sells your Rolls Royces, your Bentleys, your Ferraris, as well as other brands. Students are recruited to go into this school at the dealership to specialize, whether it is in auto mechanics, in body shop, in electronics for these vehicles. And they emerge out of their 12th grade year, +1, earning $70,000, $80,000 in the place where they studied. So these types of partnerships are key. They are relevant, as I said, they are rigorous. And just to give you a perspective, we have about 77 different industry recognized certificated programs in Miami-Dade. And we have the largest enrollment in these types of programs in the state of Florida, with close to 80,000 students availing themselves of these technically oriented choice programs, which includes in K-8 schools, middle schools, as well as high schools across Miami-Dade.
One of the things that I've noticed that's very concerning is the drop off in students enrolling in community colleges, junior colleges, 2-year colleges, and also the high absenteeism rate among high school seniors this past year, and apparent increase in dropout rates as students reach the end of their secondary schooling. I mean, this is a group of age group that seems to be profoundly impacted by the current stressful experiences we're all having. So now I think, oh, well, maybe choice can be the solution. Maybe what you need is to let people have some ability to decide how they're going to use this particular moment. So, but do you see any evidence on the ground that that is a way of keeping some of your adolescents and juniors and seniors engaged?
I think there's no doubt about it. I think that what we've discovered, there's a psychology behind choice. The data that we studied before we launched is if you pick your school, that means you're going to behave, you're not going to mess up, you're going to be motivated to go there, and we make it special. And then we see that and here's the problem that we have sometimes. Once we keep them, then we usually fail with the handoff. The fail with the handoff from us to community college, and then from community college to 4-year college. We're very lucky in Dallas that Dallas College has reinvented itself to be a partner with us, and they're seeing their numbers go way up because of our success with them. And then they are great at handing them off to a commuter university called University of North Texas at Dallas. And now we're getting those kids through the pipeline. So those handoffs, if they're happening in communities, they give, and once the kids get credit in escrow, they say, oh my God, this is possible. And now we've seen, because we followed the P-TECH model in New York, once they get an associate's degree, 80% of them go on and get a bachelor's degree, and then they start getting professional degrees. I don't know about your experience in Miami, but in other cities, I can certainly see that. Alberto, I don't know about you.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing here. I mean, terrific partnerships with community colleges, but we have observed a drop-off in enrollment in traditional community colleges, and Miami-Dade College happens to be the largest such college in the country. But we have the benefit of also having 7 colleges that are under the umbrella of the school system. So, we, in a self-serving kind of way, we try to orient a lot of our students, obviously, through our own technical colleges for those who are interested. But to your point, Paul, shame on us if, as a country, we don't take advantage of this crisis that we just navigated through to really reinvent something much more powerful that really addresses issues that students were facing even before the pandemic. And I think choice can be an extremely powerful means by which we accomplish that. Now, choice in this country, and even in Miami-Dade, has historically been seen as either programmatically driven, meaning different types of programs that appeal to different students, and sometimes it's both, a different type of governance structure, right, that runs that type of school, still publicly funded. I'm really excited about the prospect of this new third dimension of choice, which really begins to now play with time and space. You know, we've learned that not every single kid, to Robin's point initially, yes, a lot of kids across America did not do well through virtual learning, but some did flourish. So why not create and actually enhance the pathways for those students? Not every student needs to be in school for 180 days a year for 7 hours and 20 minutes a day. It is ridiculous. Why not diversify? Why not play now with time and space alongside governance and programmatic differentiation for the benefit of students? And I think that's a new frontier for choice. We are aggressively lobbying, state government to decouple funding so that we can do that more effectively from mandated seat time, an idea that I believe is imminent before us. Also playing with this idea that not every kid needs a schoolhouse to learn, and what the schoolhouse is, what it looks like, how long kids are in it, needs to fundamentally change. With that said, for a lot of kids, a traditional approach maybe works best for them. But I think successful districts and successful education in America moving forward really looks at program, choice of program, governance, flexibility, demand-driven parental decision-making that influences the program, but also the length of the school year, the length of the school day, and the architecture that houses all of it.
Robin, I have a question for you. So much of our research that we have is on charters, vouchers, tax credit, scholarship programs, and you mentioned how large the district choice student population is. What needs for? There's quite a few researchers here in attendance. What do we need to be studying? What do we need to be looking at?
Yeah, there does need to be more fine-grained research in this area, and I think the fine-grained questions are: under what conditions? What makes some choice systems and districts more effective than others? So we know choice is really prevalent. So what's leading to better outcomes for kids, and how can we get that information quickly so we can do the scaling and replication that these superintendents are so adept at? And then the other dynamic that has to be part of the research agenda is the one that David Castillo raised in the Q&A around the politics of district choice. We can't have a conversation about district choice without talking about that. The context that we're discussing mainly today has been in states that are more choice friendly generally. And we do know that superintendents who have attempted kind of portfolio type reforms have really struggled with the politics, and and have been thwarted by, it's prevented them from doing what's really right for kids. So we need to get a handle on that.
So if I can just report on a new study that I just listened to an hour ago that shows that choice in Boston and New York City, the district choice programs that are very extensive in both of these two major cities on the East Coast, and this is studied by some MIT economists who actually helped put the whole choice program together. They're saying they're getting no benefits. Those cities are getting no benefits for the kids from all of the moving around the city that's going on. The kids who are leaving their neighborhood schools and going elsewhere are not doing any better than if they had just stayed at their neighborhood school. It was a pretty disappointing study out there. Now, I'd just like your comments on what are they doing wrong in Boston and New York?
I'll start.
How long do we have?
Well, let me just throw this out. What's the common denominator? Alberto and I have been around for a long time, and how many chancellors has New? They almost had Alberto. They had him for about a minute, but they've had like 5 chancellors in the last 6 years. And Boston, since Tom Paisan left there, he was there for a decade. It's been just a complete turnover, and so I think. And sometimes we blame the board, but sometimes it's the superintendents. We throw out everything the previous guy did, so we have our toys in there. So that's just to start with. But I wish they would study Miami and Dallas, and maybe there'll be a different conclusion.
I will
All
point
right.
out that early studies of the reforms under the Bloomberg and Klein work in New York City showed through very rigorous studies showed very good outcomes for kids. So like there's changes in superintendents, change in the type of policies. This is why it's important to get under the lid and really understand under what conditions.
What I can tell you is our experience in Miami-Dade. And when I speak about choice, I'm speaking globally, across the spectrum of choice that's offered in Miami-Dade. It is not debatable, absolutely not debatable, that students who have elected to exercise choice on the basis of program affinity perform better than their colleagues, their counterparts in non-choice schools. And we have done a lot of research as to why that is. I think there is a powerful psychological element, right, that travels along with a parent and a child making a decision. The parent who chooses also is one that probably is revealing greater level of participation, right, and advocacy and interest in a child's education. So those may be specific. The impact that relevance has, right? If a kid chooses a particular program of study, they're more excited about it. They're naturally more engaged. And I think it's probably a combination of all those elements. In districts, just from my superficial, and Paul, you and your team do this for a living and do it well. From my superficial examination of this, where you don't get these types of results is because it's not embedded as part of your culture. It's not part of your theory of action. You have not really gone deep enough to obtain the results that we're getting. We don't stick to choice as part of our theory of action Miami-Dade because it sounds good. We do it because, number one, there's huge parental demand for it. Secondly, the results follow it. And therefore, we continue to roll out additional choice programs. I think, lastly, Michael is right. I think that in highly politicized areas where school choice actually becomes a partisan issue, it's not just a political issue, but it's a partisan political issue. It becomes very difficult for a superintendent who works for a political entity, right, a school board, who's sandwiched between often special interests and pressures from a number of different entities to create this systemic change that actually has viability. And usually the runway is not sufficient to ensure that. So I think that's those are my considerations at this point on that issue.
Well, thank you very much. And we're a little past the hour, but this was a fascinating discussion and all of the attendees stayed on, which is great. And a big thank you to all of the panelists. I know you're extremely busy, so thank you for taking so much time today to speak with us about this topic. We'll see everyone next week for the final session in this series, the 10th and final session. We'll be looking at the latest research on international school choice. We've got 3 really great presenters who have some very interesting studies to share with you. So we'll see you then. And thank you again to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a great weekend.